Good afternoon to you all. We are now drawing to a close for the second day, and I do hope that this discussion on this very important subject will interest you all, and we'll be able to give you some insights which you may have perhaps not had in this matter. So, it's not going to be really a broad coverage of transportation security as such. We'll be focusing on two primary areas. One of them is aviation security, which is perhaps of interest to everyone, since everyone is a traveler. Some of us more frequent than others. And we're going to deal with another very important subject, and that is coastal security and maritime security in the larger context. So each of us will make a presentation of around 15 to 20 minutes, and then we can try and take some questions. And if there are not too many questions, I do hope we won't run into the tea break. So I'll just say my little piece on aviation security, because that's an area with which I'm conversant, one of the areas with which I have dealt during my career, amongst the other areas, and have been the regulator for the Indian civil aviation security sector. So I'll say a few words on that, and then we have two very distinguished panelists who Iba has already introduced, who are going to talk on, one on the same subject as I am, a fellow traveler, and the other on the coastal aspect, about which I really don't know too much. Now, just last year, the USA said that it had uncovered a very, very serious plot to use a newfangled device, a newfangled IED, apparently to blow up aircraft, that this new device was a new type of explosive. It was more sophisticated than the devices that went before it, and you're probably aware of all the devices that have gone before this, and all the innovativeness that has gone into making these devices and concealing them. So this was more sophisticated in terms of the initiation and detonation systems, and completely non-metallic, and therefore not to be discovered by the traditional conventional methods that we have of screening at our airports. Something like the parcel bombs that were sent out from Yemen a year or so back, but much more sophisticated. And this happens in 2012, mid of 2012, 12 years after the war on terror has been fought. Osama bin Laden has been killed. Most of the top leadership based in Pakistan, in the AFPAC area of the Al-Qaeda, has been decapitated. So how do you explain this enduring interest in civil aviation, targeting civil aviation by the Al-Qaeda? And this bears all the signatures, the imprimaturs of the Al-Qaeda, and especially of the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Now, what I'm trying to drive at is that basically Al-Qaeda has been the prime mover of attacks and plots against civil aviation post 9/11, the disastrous attacks of 9/11. Initially, it was the Al-Qaeda core based in the AFPAC region, and this is what my studies and my actual experience has revealed. And subsequently, 2009 onwards, it's shifted to the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And mind you, many of these attacks are personality-driven. So it's like looking for the archer rather than for the arrow, which becomes much more important. Now, who are the prime movers? If I may just introduce you to some of them. One was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Then there was his nephew called Amar Baluchi. And there was his compatriot called Ramzi bin al-Shib. All of them who were involved in the planning and the attack in 2001 on the Twin Towers, and subsequently had such a fixation on attacking civil aviation that they plotted in Pakistan, in the AFPAC area, they hatched up a couple of very, very vicious plots to attack Heathrow with using aircraft as a missile, to attack the Library Tower in LA, once again using aircraft as missile, and attack the airport at Jakarta in the same manner. So I'm talking about personalities. So once they were arrested, that is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin al-Shib in Pakistan in 2002 and 3, then the nephew, Amar Baluchi, took over charge of perpetrating and devising these plots. Thereafter, we have another set of personalities operating out of Yemen, the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, who are also fascinated by aviation targets. One of them has already been killed. That was Anwar Awlaki. He was killed in 2011 in a drone attack. The other is Ibrahim al-Asiri, a very important name. And he is the man whose imprimatur is cast on these newfangled IEDs. He was supposed to have been killed in a drone strike, but actually he has survived. Ibrahim had used his own brother, Abdullah al-Asiri, to attack Prince Naif in 2009 using a body-concealed bomb, a bomb which was hidden within his body parts. And it was a miraculous escape for Prince Naif, who was then the deputy head of internal security in Saudi Arabia, when this man went inside with a device made by his brother, triggered it remotely, but in fact, his body took the maximum amount of the impact, and the prince only suffered probably minor abrasions to 2 fingers. So this is the kind of personalities that you have who drive the aviation terrorist plots. So maybe there is no Osama bin Laden. What I'm trying to get at is that it's not going to take much more time, or it could happen that in the future you have another KSM, a Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or an Anwar Awlaki coming up from one of the affiliates, and again targeting civil aviation, which continues to remain an enduring target for terrorists. Now, what is the calculation behind it? I spoke about this briefly yesterday. The calculation is that both defensive and offensive actions by the Al-Qaeda will stretch the so-called far enemy. As you know, the far enemy is the United States and its allies, the Israelis, and of course, India has been added to the list of enemies in 1996. So the calculation is that whether you take action or you do not take action, it will stretch you. Now how? After the parcel bomb attempt, which happened, which I just mentioned right now, after that attempt, Awlaki wrote in Inspire, the mouthpiece of the Al-Qaeda, that either you defend yourself or we attack you again. Both ways, you're the loser. If you spend, you're stretching out your resources and investing more and more money into security. If you don't defend, we'll attack you and create a disastrous situation for you. Now that is the dilemma of civil aviation today. That is the dilemma. How much more can you secure when you have already secured so much? How much more can you secure, and at what financial cost? And of course, at what cost to the passenger traveling experience? So these are the two issues which become central. Now, many people have been talking about an imaginative response and not the kind of knee-jerk response that we have to incidents in civil aviation. For example, following the parcel bomb attempts from Yemen, the immediate reaction was the induction of thousands and thousands of security-related equipment all across American airports. Now, a lot of people argue that this kind of thing is wasteful expenditure, is not proportionate to the kind of threat that you have in terms of the probability of its happening and so on and so forth. There are a lot of parameters which are used as modeling tools and things of that sort. So the dilemma is how much more to protect and how to solve the passenger inconvenience which goes on with this protection. For example, at every airport that you go, or at most European airports and the American airports in particular, you have to take off your shoes, you have to take off your belt, you have to take off your hat. And somebody recently I heard say in anger, do you want me to take off all my clothes as well? I mean, he was probably miffed at something or the other that was happening around him. So this is the kind of problems that we have. And what are we trying to do? We are trying to create a security architecture which is intelligence-based, which is risk-driven. And there are many initiatives being taken, particularly by the USA and UK, in this direction, so that you build in security into facilitation, into passenger facilitation as well, and target your resources against those who are your threats, rather than equally distribute your resources against all that you see at airports. For example, the USA, with a population of around 250 million or so, has a flying ratio of about 2.3 or 3 trips per person, means around 650 to 700 million people being scanned every day, day in, day out, 450 commercial airports. Goes on for years, nothing is found, a lot of money is spent. So this is the dilemma. And to state it briefly, because I can't go into the regulatory framework, just let me tell you one thing, that having encapsulated the essence of the threat, civil aviation is the most hardened target that you have in terms of infrastructure protection, probably around the globe. The aviation security regime is very unique. It is a global regime, and it is mandatory to follow the global instructions. Now, I'll give you briefly what it is. The Chicago Convention of 1944, which set up the Civil Aviation Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, has added an entire chapter called Annex 17 to the Chicago Convention, to which all nations almost around the world are signatories, which lays down 70 standards, if not more, and several recommended practices which must be followed by each and every signatory nation in creating a security regime in their own nations, from the apex level right down to the security checkpoint. Now, you can't have anything more complex or across the board than this. And every country is mandated to have a national civil aviation security program. I formulated one for my own country, so I know it runs into 200 pages. And every operator in an airport has to have a security program consonant with the national security program. There is an audit regime which checks, an international audit regime which checks the efficacy of the kind of systems that you have instituted, the regulatory framework as well as the ground controls. Now, you can't have anything better than that, and therefore 2001 onwards, after 9/11, there has been no catastrophic attack on civil aviation, barring one attack in 2011, I think. That was at the Domodedovo, the Moscow International Airport, where the terminal, arrivals terminal, international terminal, was bombed by probably Chechen terrorists. So you haven't had that. But has the threat disappeared? Like I told you, 2012, mid-2012, you discover a much more sophisticated plot. So the threat definitely has not disappeared, and we need to be alert about it. We need to do things perhaps in a more cost-effective, more passenger-oriented manner. But I don't think in these troubled times you can actually get away from the prophylactic security measures that we have in place and will continue to have in place for quite some time to come, with the costs having to be borne by both the governments and the airlines and other operators involved with civil aviation. So in brief, that is what I need to say, because my colleagues will elaborate on further on these issues.